I've got the t-shirt. I've got the drum machine. Let's take a closer look at the TR-909. Ikutaro Kakahashi's dedication to electronic drums spanned his entire career. At his earlier company, Ace Tony had created the famous Rhythm Ace series, and when he quit his company to form Roland in 1972, the first product he produced was a rhythm machine, and also the first of the Transistor Rhythm or TR series. Numerous models then followed until a major breakthrough came in 1978 when Roland launched their first microprocessor-controlled programmable drum machine, the CR78, which appeared on lots of hit records in the late 70s and early 80s. 2 years later came the most famous analog drum machine of all time, the TR-808, followed by the little TR-606, which of course was marketed to be paired with the TB-303. Roland lead developer Tadao Kikumoto had guided the teams that developed the 808 and 303, and in an interview in the wonderful book Inspire the Music, he interestingly notes the names of some of the engineers who were responsible for developing many of the classic Roland analog drum circuits and sounds of this era. Ooh, and by the way, I've mentioned this before, but in the 70s, Roland announced 5 upcoming modules for the System 100M that they never made. Or did they? In the last 25 years, examples of 3 of them have been found, and I, in fact, am extraordinarily lucky to have one myself. 2 have never been found, and because I'm such a mind-numbing dork, I noticed that the half-visible module on the shelf behind Kikumoto's sound is the never-released 170 module. Now get this, Ishikawa-san at the Korg Museum in Japan actually met with Mr. Kikumoto recently and very kindly asked him in person if he could remember anything about the module behind him on the shelf in this famous photo, but alas, it wasn't a project he was involved with, and he said that the people who would know are sadly no longer with us. But at least the question was asked, for which I am extremely grateful. Anyway, back to 1982. Digital drum machines were making their mark in a major way, and the Lin LM1, Lin Drum and Oberheim DMX were the boxes to have if you were a big studio or band at the time. The analog TR-808 went quickly out of fashion, at least temporarily, and it was obvious Roland needed to up their game with a successor. It was clear they needed some PCM samples in their next offering, and the machine was initially titled the TR-880D for digital, and then TR-909D, before finally simply being called the TR-909. For cost and sound manipulation reasons, it was decided that analog sounds would be used for the drums, albeit with tweaks and improvements when compared to those found on the 808, but the cymbals and hi-hats would be digital samples. Tadao Kikumoto was again brought in to work on this new drum machine, as were engineers Makoto Moroe and Yoshiro Oe. Mr. Oe specifically developed the new PCM voice circuitry. Another key figure was a new employee at the time, Atsushi Hoshiai. Mr. Hoshiai wrote the software for the 909 but also recorded the samples, and this was quite fateful as he is a drummer and had a cymbal and mismatched pair of hi-hats that he particularly liked the sound of that he thought would be perfect candidates for the 909. The cymbal was a Paiste and the hi-hats were a Paiste top and a Zildjian bottom. Playing around with the mic position and the placement of the instruments themselves, Mr. Hoshiai repeatedly sampled them around the Roland offices until he found a spot where they sounded just right. And these very specific sounding recordings done in crunchy 6-bit are probably the most recognizable hi-hat and cymbal samples ever. The instrument included the then brand new MIDI connectivity, adjustable shuffle, adjustable flam, and both channel and total accents, along with the ability to sequence external equipment as part of a raft of improvements. The end result was a punchy, zappy, powerful box that wasn't particularly successful upon release. Whilst it was used by bands like Skinny Puppy and Mantronix, according to Roland's official figures, the production was halted after just 9 months due to underwhelming sales, and attention moved to all digital instruments like the TR-707, 626 and 505. That so easily could have been the end of the 909 story, but as we all know, it absolutely was not. With 909s lurking in bargain bins and second-hand shops, young musicians picked them up and made them a key element of the new genres they were pioneering. By the late 80s, the 909 was a major part of the drum arsenal of house, acid and techno producers in particular, and by the early 90s it crossed over into the mainstream and proliferated the airwaves through the scores of artists who used it, from Derek May, Frankie Knuckles and Jeff Mills, who was famously a 909 virtuoso, to Madonna, Adamski, the Pet Shop Boys, Bjork, Richie Hawtin, Carl Cox, a guy called Gerald, Larry Heard, Daft Punk, Aphex Twin, Inner City, Robin S, Ace of Base, Phil Collins, Lisa Stansfield, Soul to Soul, Dr. Alban, Faithless, Technotronic, Scooter, Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, Robert Miles, Radiohead, Orbital, The Future Sound of London, Fatboy Slim, Moby, The Chemical Brothers, The Prodigy, and on and on and on. Tune into the charts in the 90s and you wouldn't have to wait long until you heard the 909. And now it is rightly revered as an all-time classic drum machine. So TR-808, TR-909, Roland's two most famous drum machines. What's the difference? There are quite a few differences. This has got more sounds, this has got more features, but rather than get bogged down with that stuff, what's the fundamental sonic differences between the two? So 808 bass drum, famously a real subby, tubby boom. And it's got a real note to it, to the point that people sample it, pitch it around, make bass lines out of it. And if you hear the kids talking about 808s, they're probably referring to that rather than the 808. 909, totally different sound. A real donk. It's about a tack transient. It's got a tune, which is actually an envelope depth, but it affects the pitch. So it's not tuning in the traditional sense, but it certainly affects the pitch. But even with the decay wide open, it's not that. That's a boom. That's a zing, a zap. Bring in the snare on the 808, and you get that classic, kind of hip hop snare drum that we all know and love. There's not much you can do with it. Snare on this, quite a different sound. You've got more control, so you can shape it a bit more. But it's, again, quite a different sound. You can already hear from just bass drum, snare drum, that this is kind of more hip-hop and this is more techno. I know it's no more complicated than that, but you know what I mean. So, over to the toms, those really charming analog toms. On this, also analog toms, but again, it's just a tack transient. These are so danceable, and you would use them for something very different than you would use this. I think, in my opinion, these are the best analog toms ever made. Clap and rim. Quite a different sound to these guys. I'm less of a fan of the clap on this. It's more like a kind of clop, and that's more of a kind of... interestingly, this has got a digital noise generator, so that's probably part of the reason it sounds different to the 808. Hi-hats are obviously going to be a massive difference because these are analog hats and these are those famous samples. Bring up a cymbal as well on here. You've got that really metallic-y analog cymbal. Let's bring up the ride on here. And it's a digital sample, so completely different. Let's have them both at the same time, one in each ear. Isn't that wonderful? But that is basically the fundamental difference between an 808 and a 909. So something I wanted to demonstrate that doesn't get spoken about very often is that you can control external devices with the TR-909. So it's MIDI notes on a per step basis. You can't sustain them across steps. So it's best suited for firing off other drum machines, but you can play bass lines or even chords from a TR-909. So if we press Shift and external instrument, so I've got a kick drum going just for reference. So what we can do is we can go into tap mode and this becomes a keyboard. Now it's quite hard to play as a keyboard, but let's do some of the notes in one pass and then do the rest in the next. Okay. And then let's do this over the top. And there we go. We've got some chords coming out of there. Let's do another one. You can just keep layering them up like this. And there we go, we've got the XV5080 firing off from the TR-909. Just stop that a moment. You can then add in total accent on that, and you can also swing the whole thing. So here's one I made earlier. So you might not have known that you can do that from a 909. So where do we go with the 909 now? And there is a boutique version of it, there is an official plug-in version of it, there are clones of it, but it's quite a well-trodden path, and so I think what people want to do is put their own twist on it. And one of my viewers, PW Martin, sent me a picture of his heavily modded 909 along with some recordings. Check this out. And I love the sound of those mods because it still sounds like the 909, but it's definitely different. And inspired by that, I've made a big sample pack of this 909. I've run it through an Akai MPC-60 and an EMU SP12 and even recorded it to the Sansway 6-track cassette recorder and sampled it back. And that is all available on my Patreon. But if you're not on my Patreon, check this out. So that is the Biotic XT909, which is a really interesting spin on the 909 paradigm in a modern format. And even better, there's a discount code, which is in the video description, which will be applicable for a limited period of time. Huge thank you to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you to you for watching. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you.